Friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. Part 1. A New Life. The divorce from my wife didn't really upset me. The careerist ate up my entire bald spot with her reproaches. She wanted me to get out into big people and not waste my life in a carpenter's shop with drunks and criminals. At first, it turned out to be difficult, promising that I would dig up capital and open my own charazga. But over the years it became more difficult. The wife herself demonstrated an unprecedented grip at her work, quickly moved up the career ladder, and even the decree did not stop her, only slowed her down for a year while she breastfed our son. And as the offspring got stronger, she dumped it on me with the verdict, "You're doing some shit. You'd better sit with your son. I have to work." I had nothing to object to in general. I did not want to change my profession and team, which I later did not regret, because when I found out about my wife's infidelities, I would hardly have taken care of the boy without the men from work. I wasn't going to leave my son to a fool, and she didn't really fight for him. But she offered financial support, whatever you say, though I didn't need the money, also earned by the holes of an affordable girl. My feelings for her smoldered even when we stopped living together. I confess, I watched her sometimes, perhaps naively hoping for the restoration of the family, and saw how one would drive her home in an expensive foreign car, then another would pick her up in a similar car. I realized that a beautiful girl was allowed to go around in a circle, maybe even a schedule was drawn up for her. It was sickening. I decided to leave this woman in the past, get away from her with my son. I had enough strength and money to move to a small village a couple hundred kilometers from my hometown, where I bought a simple house, found a job I liked, and began to slowly settle in. Contrary to expectations, the village turned out to be developed and modern, with most of the benefits available to the city. It's just that life here was measured and simple, the way I always wanted, and my ex-wife condescendingly rejected it. I was happy, in short, quickly forgetting about the stuffy city, and I would have forgotten about my ex-wife if she hadn't called once a week, showing unexpected interest in her son. I did not interfere with communicating with them. I did not see anything wrong with this, and besides, despite the paradise place, a single father had to turn around in a new place. It was not up to prohibitions. For example, the summer was ending, the child had to be enrolled in school, and this turned out to be a somewhat confusing business. The school administration stayed at home. I had to rush from one end of the village to the other to meet with the director, and then the head teacher, who invited me to talk to my first graders class teacher. Well, according to the law of meanness, a teacher lived a few yards away from me. No, to know her address right away would save half a day. By the way, her house turned out to be not so good. It required the intervention of a man. Either the woman was not married, or the husband did not want to deal with housing, or he worked as a shift, but it did not concern me. I confidently knocked on the door, waited for an answer for a while, and when I didn't wait for it, I ducked into the house. It's not that I'm an ill-mannered dick, but when visiting the locals, I realized that the people here were completely simple, jokingly scolded for excessive displays of culture. Well, I decided to follow the advice I received, went in without asking and found the hostess in the hallway, wiping the floor on the driftwood. Upon hearing the guests, the woman adjusted a light dress on her ass, forcing the hem to go lower, but she did not stop her occupation. "Now," the hostess exhaled, waving a wet rag and shaking her buttocks due to active actions, "I'm just going to finish." The woman did not deceive. Got up, finished cleaning, stared at me, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "Are you a new neighbor?" A short, slightly plump brunette clarified in a soft voice. Michaelik called, warned that you would come in, so I decided to wipe the floor quickly. It sounded like an excuse, but the embarrassment on the beautiful, wide-cheeked face of the woman was not noticeable. She smoothed the dress on the sides and hips, briefly showing the feminine curves of her body, tidied up her disheveled hair, and called me to follow her into the kitchen. "My name is Masha, that is, for your son Maria Alexandrovna," the hostess said casually, pouring tea into 2 cups. Vases with delicacies were already standing, covered with napkins. "I am a Russian language teacher by profession. I will lead Vanka until the 4th grade. But I'm strict. If your kid is a schoolboy, then blame yourself. I'm good at treating this nonsense." I did not know what to answer. I was discouraged by the current situation from the very beginning of acquaintance, and the sweet chatterbox did not allow me to recover, immediately switching to familiarity and threats. "Sit down," a beautiful woman suggested, sitting down first and crossing her legs, showing strong, voluminous hips, but not for long. She immediately pulled the hem of her dress over them. "Tell me about yourself." I described my life situation in general terms, without denigrating my ex-wife with details of the reasons for the separation, promised that my son would not cause any trouble, and decided to stop there. Maria listened to me without feigned interest. It was much more pleasant for her to stuff me with her cooking and look at me. A dreamy smile did not leave her sweet face. I really, sinfully, wondered if this beauty had fallen in love with me. But it seems that I was thinking too well of myself. As soon as I finished listening to my story, the woman slapped her thighs loudly, quickly jumped up on her legs and, without waiting for my reaction, walked away, throwing, "Finish your meal there, and I'll run. We need to take Linka away from her mother." Of course, I was unworthy of explanations, so, after chewing on a pancake, I headed home, but I paused in front of the front door because the sight of Maria changing clothes inadvertently attracted my attention. The viewing angle was absolutely unfavorable. Only a part of the beauty was visible. The partially closed door prevented me from fully examining it, and I did not dare to approach to increase the viewing angle. But even without that, I was pleased with the sight of black panties on a lush ass and an oval of heavy tits that briefly flashed through the gap. It was necessary to retreat urgently. It couldn't carry so much. The next time I happened to cross paths with Maria was a month later, even though we were neighbors, but somehow there was no chance to meet. A woman came to our carpentry shop and she was serious, but friendly, as she was at our first meeting. It looked like she was returning from school, looking unexpectedly formal in a formal jacket and a long, tight skirt. The clothes slimmed her, perfectly emphasized her waist against the background of wide hips, but I knew that the beauty still had extra pounds in the form of a belly and folds on the sides. The jacket was barely pulling Masha's chest. It was trying to open, and the hostess herself was probably not averse to taking off her tight clothes. The woman used makeup to a minimum, for which she could only be thanked. It was 100 times more pleasant to see the natural beauty of a green-eyed beauty than the identical physiognomies of urban Nyashkas. The image of a classical teacher was added by a strict styling, although without a bump on the back of her head, but just with a thick tail of black hair. "Hello, Min," the beauty greeted, not moving far from the door so as not to scratch her black stiletto shoes. "The picket fence is over. We need to update it. The queue is scheduled for 6 months." Semyon, a gray-haired man under 60, jokingly refused the request. "The picket fence is in fashion now." "Yes, he gave up your picket fence to someone," Maria snapped, "and it will rot. You'd better sell it to me for half the price. You can't do anything else anyway." Semyon pretended to be offended, went to the teacher, scaring her with dusty hugs, but the curvy doll deftly dodged them, as if she accidentally noticed me. "Oh, neighbor," she exclaimed joyfully, "help me." "Ah." And the old man seemed to have lost a couple of decades. He kept trying to catch the nimble customer until she jumped out of the joiner's shop laughing. "Cool woman." "Ah, Andreyuka." A colleague nudged me when we were alone again. "Beautiful. She's funny and smart." Instead of answering, I just grinned, agreeing with every point. "Would you have planted it for her?" A cheerful peasant winked. "Such a fleshy chick. Good gray-haired." I waved off, making the most concentrated look when studying the documentation for the new machine. "You can't call women that." "What are you talking about, you wretch?" The elderly vulgar man laughed. "She really should have changed the fence." I besieged the joker. "She's breathing hard. All in props." "Well, go replace it." Semyon winked. "Take a lot of fuckers with you. Listen to a knowledgeable person." I knew that it was useless for a cheerful man to prove anything, so I pretended that I accepted the jokes of a colleague, and I started commissioning the machine myself. I was busy until the end of the shift, and when I left, I found out from my partner, who is also the owner of the joiner's shop, that I have a day off tomorrow, for which I have to put a new fence on my neighbor's nose. In general, I was satisfied with such a hack, of course. Not that I was seriously hoping for love with Masha, after all, a married and serious woman, but I just wanted to be in the company of a beautiful girl, well, and help her, of course. I got busy early in the morning, hoping to get it done before lunch, and then go fishing with my son to thank the kid for his success at school. The fence was generally ready, relying on the eye. I even risked sawing a vein to fit the size, and I guessed right. Dismantling the old creation took me much longer than erecting a new fence, and I used only a hand tool, afraid to disturb the tranquility of my fellow villagers with a gasoline drill. As a result, when Masha came out on the porch half asleep at 9 o'clock, I was already finishing with the gate closer. The sleepy beauty was not surprised by the new thing, but it was clear from her face that the woman was delighted. Perhaps even more so than I was, staring at the hostess, dressed in a knee-length nightgown. Maybe I was set up by fantasy, or maybe I was just hungry, but it seemed to me that the nightgown on the beauty was translucent. I could clearly make out the melons of her tits, from the heaviness sagging to her tummy, the patch of black pubic hair, the silhouette of her strong thighs. Maria shivered from the morning freshness, hugged herself by the shoulders, becoming somehow unbearably lonely, but immediately made a joke, dispelling the pity that appeared for her. "What are you bullying about?" She smiled sweetly, leaning sideways against the pole supporting the canopy over the porch. "People are sleeping, and he started the construction of the century here." "Yes, I wanted to finish the fence early so that I could hang out with Venka on the river," I honestly admitted. "I'm sorry if I woke you up." "Let's go inside." The woman waved her hand, inviting me to follow her. "I definitely won't let you go without breakfast now." I obeyed, and I was really hungry. It was just time for breakfast. He sat down in the kitchen in his own place and became quiet. The hostess didn't say anything either, although she never complained about the sharpness of her tongue, as far as I could tell. I just stood silently by the gas stove and watched the sausage and fried eggs being fried. The professionalism drained from her. She relaxed so much that she even allowed herself to rest her pin on her hip, once again demonstrating the love difference between her waist and hips. "I haven't cooked breakfast for a man for a long time," Masha explained her behavior, as if reading my thoughts and calming me down. "If you want something else, say it. Don't be shy. You're my savior now. Otherwise, I'm fucked up with these props." Maria blushed, realizing that she was complaining, which I didn't like at all, so I decided to cheer her up at all costs. "Don't do anything. Thanks." I waved it off, began to devour food. It's a simple matter for me to drive out 50 pieces of wood in the carpenter's shop. It was nice to help. "All right." The beauty put on a carefree face on duty. "How much do I charge?" I was confused. The last thing I needed was money from this woman, who, to be honest, charmed me. A simple thank you and shooting beautiful green eyes would have been enough for me. Well, maybe I wouldn't have refused a kiss on the cheek. I informed the woman about the gratuitousness of the service and quickly finished with a delicious breakfast, sincerely thanked the hostess for the comfort and attention, was about to leave. But Maria suddenly put her hands on my hips, not allowing me to get up from the table, approached her face close to mine and whispered. It was impossible to believe what I had heard. I regretfully admitted to myself that it was only a figment of my imagination, but the beauty still sat with her hands on my hips and scrutinized my face, sweetly and trustfully crossing her beautiful eyes on my lips, then on my hair, then on my nose, but I tried not to look at my eyes. "Andrew." The beauty breathed out when I pulled her clothes, intending to take them off. "Daughter, don't push it, please. He's so cool. Just be quiet," Masha commanded. "Thank you, honey. Come on." The woman waved off, but it was obvious from her appearance that she was glad that she was able to satisfy a man. "What's awesome there? You couldn't even take half a lump." Only made me more excited. It was absolutely not true. The woman gave me unprecedented pleasure, and not so much because I had not had a mistress for a couple of months, but because of the behavior of the beauty. I walked up to her from behind, hugged her tummy, hugging her tightly. Masha was preparing a new portion of breakfast, probably for herself and her daughter. So, hiding behind her busy schedule, she was in no hurry to break out, and when I kissed her in the ear, she just giggled sweetly, roused from pleasure, tilted her head, providing a neck for my lips. "My daughter is asleep," the woman reminded. "You got what you wanted. Why don't you stop?" "What about you?" I asked, carefully lifting the hem of her nightgown. The woman was right. I kissed her last on the lips and went home. Part 2. On a slippery slope. Ira was glad to get rid of her soft-hearted husband. In recent years, she often had to dig into herself to find out what attracted her to Andre, who was nothing like himself. There was no answer to this question, and it was rhetorical. The woman shamelessly put it in the back drawer, preferring to devote more time to the boss Sergey. Systematic love with him was the main reason for the beauty's success. She was well aware of this, therefore, without hesitation, she changed her relationship with her husband to the needs of an influential businessman. An intelligent woman even managed to hide her infidelities, and perhaps everything would have continued in her life with her cuckold husband and rich daddy if Anton, Sergey's partner, had not appeared one day. There wasn't enough for three of them, purely physically. Then Irina realized for the first time that she was a thing. Beautiful, pleasant in many ways, in a beautiful package. Sergey did not even flinch when Anton asked him to borrow a business assistant for the evening. He agreed without hesitation, without even asking the opinion of the woman present at this conversation. The beauty tried to get excited, but realizing that she was annoying her boss with her conversation, she resigned herself to her new role. She was no stranger to being a beautiful accessory at business meetings. She also knew perfectly well what she would do after a tedious event, so she performed her functions efficiently, satisfying the needs of a new client. Since then, she has become a litter for two, and it could not be hidden from her husband. Their marriage and family came to an end, which seemed to remove some restrictions from Irina's lovers. Men began to use the beauty in turn every day during the first week of their bachelor life, thoroughly exhausting the poor thing in love battles. However, she was not allowed to quit so easily. One morning, she just found a young man at the entrance in a white Volvo. He introduced himself as Maxim and said that Sergey Anatolyevich had recommended her. He didn't explain anything else, just offered to get in the car. Offended by the insolence of the former boss, the woman tried to figure out a relationship with him, but was put in place by harsh reality. She let herself be used for money. That's how it's going to stay. As an alternative, they suggested starting from scratch and with empty pockets. The beauty, accustomed to a luxurious life, was not ready for this, so she sat down with a stranger. Contrary to expectations, the woman was taken not to a hotel, as it usually happened, but to a country cottage, where a drunken feast of a motley rich public was going on. Ira was taken to a separate house, where she and the rest of the fools had to prepare for the upcoming orgy. Offended by the abrupt change of role, the beauty let's call Sergey or Anton, but she was ignored by both former lovers, but lost her allotted time. The girls have already changed into their working clothes, showing off feminine charms and playing over the lust of customers, while Ira remained in her elegant black dress with a small neckline in front, capable of collecting a third-size breast into a love shaft without a bra. She intended to pick up some major in this outfit, asking for a friend to a social event organized by her, but she got here. And although no one was clearly interested in her, after all, professional fools knew a lot about their craft, quickly snatched up the most promising prey. A confused, beautiful blonde, who looked nothing like a cheap girl, attracted the attention of picky males. They separated into a separate group of 5 individuals, sitting impressively on 2 sofas, and Ira joined them. Lady, 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 Ira's unknown lovers cheerfully replied, very pleased with the fact that they had printed out such a cool fool. The woman had already been driven home by other guys, and she got there only a couple of days later, finding herself in demand for sexual pleasures by a female. Well, at least they didn't offend her with money, they even overpaid her, but they asked for regular customers. Part 3. To each his own. I did not give a firm answer. I covered myself with my son, they say. I will find out his opinion and answer later. That should have been the end of the conversation, but I fell for that bitch's voice again and listened to her carefree, cheerful chatter for another half hour. That's what attracted me to her at the time. I didn't even see her then, but the gentle voice and intonation just conquered me. I began to dream of that stranger. And again those feelings came together, diluted the resentment of betrayal. I hurried to end the conversation, realizing that I was stuck in the charms of a woman I still loved, and a sneaky worm settled in my head, which lets itch. She realized everything. She will change. Give her a chance. She is only yours. Neighbor, are you at home? Masha's cheerful voice pulled me out of my sweet thoughts. The woman, as expected, entered without knocking, but did not go beyond the threshold. She was waiting for the owner's answer. I absently went out to her, but quickly pulled myself together and demonstrated the joy of meeting her. "I'm sorry." The little girl giggled, blushed, but did not demonstrate modesty. On the contrary, radiated playfulness. "How are you?" "Everything is fine, beautiful," I smiled. I wanted to enjoy the company of this wonderful woman, but the ex spoiled everything here, luring me to a meeting in my thoughts. "Please come in. I'll buy you something." "What are you doing, you fool?" Masha laughed, making a strange face. "I'm not here for tea. I don't have time." "What are you doing on the weekend?" "Well, I don't know." I hesitated, keeping Irina's suggestion in mind. "I wanted to go to the city with my son." The following behavior of the guest shocked me. The cutie grabbed me by the breasts, pushed me against the wall, and leaned on me with her whole body. She acted like a rapist, and if it wasn't for her perky face, I would have believed in her bitchiness. But she was still the same sweet, homely beauty. "Lenka is being taken by her sister for the whole weekend." The woman whispered fervently, began to rub against me. "We can make love all night." "You want me, don't you, honey?" I deftly jumped into the hostess's room, and the woman promptly slammed the window behind me. We stood opposite each other in silence for a minute, getting used to the darkness and trying to distinguish each other. "Thank you, Andre." The woman breathed in my ear. "Now be careful." "Okay." The baby jumped until she was completely exhausted, and then lay down on me and buried her face in my side of my chest. She was literally dripping with sweat, and her body temperature was like a fever. Her heart was pounding wildly, and then she moaned under my arm. We lay there for about half an hour. In theory, this time was usually enough to regain strength and desire, but this time it did not happen. We were exhausted to the limit. We lay in silence. There was a kind of oppressive feeling of the upcoming unpleasant news. "It can't be that good." "My husband is coming on Monday," Masha whispered, as if apologizing. "We will not be able to be together anymore." I lay there, realizing that yes, it couldn't be that good. My wife called, hinted at the restoration of the family. I admitted, but in fact poured out my soul. "You fool. She is not worthy of you and Vanka," the beauty said with regret in her voice, staring at me with a face barely discernible in the pre-dawn twilight, putting her palm under her chin. "And if you—" I foolishly blurted out, but Masha stopped me here in time. "I love my husband. We have Lenka with him. I will not trade this for any kind of love," the woman firmly stated, laying her cheek on my chest again. It was impossible to say more. And the pleasure of lying on a hard floor under a strange woman has gone somewhere. I even suddenly realized that Masha is heavy compared to my Ira. Perhaps even all her forms are just a consequence of being overweight. "Go away," Pasheka said in a colorless voice, pulled away from me, and then got to her feet. I looked at her from behind for the last time, realized that I was mistaken. Maybe I was just offended by nothing. Masha was stunningly beautiful. I got dressed. He climbed out the window.